Please welcome Ohan Breiding Shoghig Halajian.
I was going to say another golf clap. I'm sorry.
That's so good.
But the camera loves you.
Great. We'll try and love the camera. Okay. So, thank you so much.
They're recording?
I'll turn it down. Yeah. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you, John and Ed, and thank you for being here. And Bill also, and Kate, maybe who's upstairs. Thank you for helping with the install. So my name is Ohan, and this is Sho, and we're going to talk about our past works today, and a little bit of like what led us to start collaborating together, and then we'll end on Souvenir, the project that is upstairs that we can then go see together. So in the back, if you want to start playing that maybe? Yeah? Okay. So I'm playing a video piece behind us with the sound muted. It is titled Swarm. And my artistic practice started with photography and then expanded to video and installation. Throughout my projects, collaboration has been a key strategy. Collaboration not only goes against the notion of the single author or artist, but also embraces collectivity and entails nurturing relationships that are founded on and support experimentation, risk-taking, surprise, and even failure. Collaboration has been a way for me to highlight relationality and interdependency and hospitality as a politics in my practice. This piece behind me was made in 2013. It explores the landscape of Death Valley in Eastern California, part of the northern Mojave Deserts. I traveled to this location 17 times, studying its unique phenomena, the climate, and its impact on the body. I was interested in its extreme heat and dry conditions, the fact that it's the lowest spot in the Western Hemisphere, and the vivid silence of the area. The desert landscape and these stunning sand dunes of Death Valley National Monument and its proximity to Los Angeles and Hollywood have made it a popular location for movie shoots. In Star Wars, Death Valley is the stand-in for many scenes on the fictional planets Tatooine, parts of Return of the Jedi, Kill Bill, and many other classic films, including Spartacus and Tarzan, were also shot in Death Valley. Swarm was made in collaboration with my students at the time from Oakwood Arts High School, with the invitation of 2 other artists. It was shot in the Eureka Dunes, the second tallest sand dunes in the nation. The Eureka Dunes are located outside of Death Valley and require 4-wheel drive vehicles to get to this remote place. The performance was enacted once and only for the camera. It pairs an epic backdrop with a potential failure embedded in collectivity and improvisation. I gave my students a few guidelines, situating them on the ledge of the dunes at a similar proximity from one another, and at the signal of a sound to begin moving with animal-like gestures. I asked them to move as if they were individual insects, animals, or creatures, to think of themselves in relation to the insects and species that live in these harsh conditions, and then to gather at the bottom of the dunes to form a grouping, a herd, a flock, a swarm. While I'm playing this video without sounds, you would usually be hearing sound 3 times throughout this piece. And it's 11 minutes long usually. So the beginning signal to initiate the participants' movement, the roar of a military test jet flying overhead, really close to the students, and then at the end, a collective vocalization as each person says the vowels A, E, I, O, U repeatedly while moving swarm-like towards the camera, sounding their oscillating positions as individual and as part of a collective entity. We can go to the next. So in the Death Valley series, I employ performance within an aesthetic tradition of Western masculinist land art and landscape photography as a way to demonstrate the futility and impossibility of claiming territory as one's own. The next, please. Again, you see a collaboration with my students at Death Valley's Racetrack Playa, a dry lake bed best known for its mysteriously moving rocks. Rocks that were thought to be moved through extraterrestrial force, or perhaps by pranksters moving them at night until scientists figure out their movement occurring through something called the curling effect, an effect that happens when rainwater freezes during the desert winter and strong winds carry the rocks across the dried out lake bed, turned to ice, leaving tire-like traces behind. In addition to this natural phenomenon, this landscape activated many questions for me about the body and embodiment, the stillness of photography, and the ephemerality of performance. As a queer-identified artist, I am invested in the practice of community and in thinking of kinship and belonging beyond state-sanctioned legitimized formations such as marriage or the nuclear family. In fact, this is what brought Sho and I together as collaborators. In 2015, we worked together on an exhibition, Sho as curator, me as artist, titled Epitaph for Family, which opened a few weeks after the legalization of same-sex marriage in the US. The project was a multi-channel video, 16mm film, and photographic installation that explored artists' and activists' relationship to the institution of marriage and family, and to reimagine alternative kinship structures. This marked our first collaboration. Swarm, the first piece that you saw, is also related to these issues as it takes up collectivity through performance and through intergenerational collaboration. And here's just an image of the billboard that Swarm was then later turned into in New York City. So another key thread in my work is looking to the landscape and to geographical anomalies as a witness to historical events of rupture or upheaval. And in many ways, the seeds of this were planted early on in my Death Valley series. I continue to work with fellow artists and writers and have a teaching practice that I consider to be invaluable to my work as an artist. Yeah, you want to switch positions?
Yeah. I can also do this.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so, hi. So I'm going to speak about our first collaboration together, but a bit of information on myself too, some background. So I come to art making from a curatorial practice. So I've worked in Los Angeles for over a decade in the nonprofit arts. And currently I'm a co-director of a collective-run art space in Los Angeles called Human Resources, and I also co-edit an online journal called Georgia that looks at the intersection of art and politics, or art and community organizing practices. So again, yeah, collaboration is also deeply important throughout my work. So in general, my curatorial and art writing practice, themes of place, belonging, radical politics around gender and racial justice are really important, so Ohan and I had a lot of shared interests. So our first major moving image collaboration, beyond the curator-artist collaboration, started in 2018, and it ended up being a 27-minute video work titled The Rebel Body. You see one of the installations of it here in Los Angeles. So The Rebel Body tells a story of Ana Gildi, a woman who is historicized as the last person to be officially persecuted for witchcraft by the Swiss government in the town of Glarus in 1782, a town that Ohan grew up next to about 45 minutes away from. A video still. So I, at the time, was also researching this history, looking into the work of a Marxist feminist theorist and activist named Silvia Federici, who wrote a book titled Caliban and the Witch, which discusses the European witch hunts as gendered violence against women, connecting it to the emergence of capitalism and the way in which this moment privatized common resources like land and food, and inevitably impacted social relations and mostly the position of women in society. Another video still. Okay, so Ohan and I went to the town of Glarus a few times over the span of a few years for extended periods of time, and our goal was to trace Ana Gildi's final route through this town and to look into how this history is still alive in the landscape and in the memories and stories of current town residents. So I'm going to share a bit of a longer excerpt. It's 8 minutes of the beginning clip of the video, just to kind of show you the tone of the work and also our own kind of role journeying through the town. I should note that the introductory words are loosely excerpted from a biography on Anna Göldi by the author Johanna Spiri, so in some way it's a collaboration with her. So this will run for 8 minutes.
And maybe we'll just sit always and then come back.
Yeah.
That's okay. Have a nice dinner.
Let's see.
aus 4 Parteien zerbrach an einem Streit über den UNO-Migrationspakt. Kuba nimmt einen Paragraphen zur Ehe für alle doch nicht in die Verfassung. Damit wolle man alle Meinungen zum Thema respektieren. In 2 Jahren will Kuba in einem Familiengesetz festlegen, wer eine Ehe eingehen kann.
Nachrichten aus Ihrer Region, jetzt im Regionaljournal. Nur auf SRF 1. Regionaljournal Ostschweiz und Graubünden. Mein Name Anina Mattis. Jetzt rechts abfahren.
On here? No. Yeah, right.
Theo, ich fahre nach Lodge.
Entschuldigung. I'm doing a Kunstproject on Anna Göldi.
Huh?
Anna Göldi.
Anna Göldi.
Yeah, you know?
Yes, I know the name. And here is a house, a special house from Anna Göldi. A moment, please, I ask you.
Okay.
Da, wo steht Anna Göldi Haus? Ja, ist doch da in der Nähe.
So, Theo, bring
Weißt du das?
was Postleiter.
Nein, sie fragen, wo das Haus ist von der Anna Göldi.
Hanna müsste jetzt
Ja, da vorne, da ist nicht der Horn, wo der Portugiese Club ist, das ist so. Das muss
Da
ich
ist gerade eine Tankstelle.
Ja, Anna Göldi ist ja
Ist
da.
aber an der Hauptstraße, oder?
Ja, noch nicht dazu. So hat sie Geburtstag, oder was?
Nein,
anschaut, das ist gut, ja. Die wissen es ja. Ja, sicher, sag's ja.
Ja, das gibt ja verschiedene Prognosen.
okay. It's better than you ask on the railway office. He left,
Was sagst du was?
and so it's 10-12 meters. And so you become the sure answer. Huh?
Danke.
Okay. It's better here, yes.
Nein, das ist wirklich gemein.
Ah, yes, it's not so correct. Nobody knows. So, okay, it's better here.
Genau.
Ganz sicher. Kann ich Sie ganz schnell etwas fragen?
Ja, sicher.
Sie kennen die Geschichte über die Anna Göldi? Wir haben jetzt gerade das Schild hier gesehen.
Hinter dem Spital hat es einen Parkplatz
Und dort unten haben sie es.
Dort unten am Parkplatz.
Ja, genau.
Okay.
Ja. Und eigentlich haben die Zürcher wollen als sie abnehmen und dann verurteilen. Und die Glarner haben Angst gehabt, sie werden nachher wieder freigelassen. Und darum haben sie dann eben da. Und es war ja noch ein kleines politisches Geschichte, das Ganze.
Ja, ja. Ist sie irgendwo begraben worden oder wo haben sie?
Das weiss kein Mensch,
Ja.
wo die ist, von dem her.
Ja.
Genau.
Aber irgendwo da noch in der Landschaft vielleicht?
Ich glaube es nicht.
Hoi Kasper, da ist Johanna von Kalifornien. Ich wollte wissen, ob es noch okay ist, wenn wir heute vorbeikommen zum Morgenessen.
Ja, welche Karte?
Ja, ich habe gedacht, so um 9 oder halb 10.
Ja, das ist prima. Wo sind wir?
Wir sind in Glarus und dann...
Ja, wunderbar.
Und die Anna Göldi als junges Mädchen musste Arbeit suchen. Ich musste Familie durchbringen. Das heisst also für Familie sorgen. Eines der ältesten Kinder war sie. Und allemal hat man hier im Rheintal
Ah, mach gar nicht,
Ja,
kannst
ja.
abnehmen. Ist alles gut.
Trainer. Hallo Susanne. Es war eine schöne Zeit, gell? Ja. Ja, ich auch, du. Ich meine, der Heiri hat nicht mehr mögen, um Schock war es auch gleich. Und das Babetli war gerade gestorben. Das ist... Nein, das ist jetzt auch nicht gut. Ja, und ist ja sonst auch ein armer Hagel, weisst. Ja, das hat es nicht schön im Leben. Nein. Nein. Nein, dem geht's nicht gut. Ja, der war Trögaler, weisst. Ja. Übrigens, ich weiss nicht, Charles Margaret ist gestorben. Aha. Ja. Das war ja Ende 18. Jahrhundert.
Das war die Dienstmann in Glaris, im Herrschaftshaus.
Und Glarnerland war hier schon gut industrialisiert.
Hat auch ein Verhältnis mit dem Mann.
Ist dann schwanger geworden.
Und dort hat sie auch ein Verhältnis mit dem Sohn.
Aber wenn sie beschrieben wird, ist es eine bildhübsche Frau.
Eines von diesen Kindern hat Stecknadeln gegessen.
Und er hat die Frau nicht so gerne gehabt.
Und dann haben sie aus der Magd loswerden.
Und schlussendlich ist sie ja da enthauptet worden. Wir haben sie gefoltert. Stellen Sie sich das vor.
I'm not a historian, so I don't really know exactly all the details in this one. But she was condemned and to death, and she was probably on the accusation to be a witch.
Okay, so and some of the archival footage that you see in that clip is also from a film, kind of more of a fictionalized film that they made about Anna Gildi's life. So we, through our many visits, we met with different residents in the town of Glarus who retold her story in the way that they remember it or the way that it was passed down to them. As Anna Gildi is well known in this town, as is the broader history of the witch hunts in the area. So the residents included local politicians, alpine geologists, a midwife, a priest, And as a structure, the video uses gossip as a narrative form in an attempt to subvert what was a tool of social control and a tool for heightening paranoia at the time as a way of kind of spreading the fear of witchcraft against women. So as you saw in the clip, residents share their own versions of the story, and oftentimes there are differing perspectives on her. And then there's these moments where they also enact more performative moments for the camera. So we weren't interested in thinking about like a single truth in retelling the story of Anna Gildi, but thinking about the different versions of this history and how it's passed down today. And then also accounting for the performance of history, the way that it's still alive in the present every time somebody retells it, and that it's constantly shifting. So in the film, we also worked with Silvia Federici, the author of Caliban and the Witch, and her role was really to kind of frame Goldie's story within the broader context of the European witch hunt. So I'm going to play a 4-minute clip where you hear Sylvia talking about the witch hunts, framing it through the lens of how it was kind of enacted as a form of gendered violence and its presence in our lives today.
It's very, very clear that, over the persecution of the witches, the torture, the massacre, the killing, the brutal assassination, there is a whole curtain that has been drawn. And the whole story of the witches and witch hunts has been turned into a sort of folklore, something mythological. The fact that hundreds of thousands of women were burnt alive in Europe in the course of 3 centuries and accused of being enemies of society, servants of the devil, was never considered enough important to become, even the subject of a footnote in school or in a book that passed through my hands. And in fact, it has been turned into a source of amusement.
So, jetzt gilt's, ha?
Jetzt geht's.
practice running up and down choreography. Okay, so as we were making this work, we were thinking of an intergenerational lineage between Anna Göldi, Silvia Federici, and ourselves as we were walking the same landscape that Anna walked, thinking about how the mountains and the place preserves and even retells the story. So in this work, we were drawing a connection between the figure of a subversive woman during the witch hunts and queer subjects. After her legally sanctioned murder in 1782, the Swiss government made witch hunting or witchcraft illegal. And then much later in 2014, they officially apologized for the history of mass persecution of women and constructed a memorial in Göldi's honor in the town, which is one of the reasons why this history is really present in the residents' consciousness. So in this next clip, I'm going to do just a short 2-minute clip. You'll see the final moments of the video, which includes archival footage of town residents voting. So it's important to note that women got the right to vote in 1971 in Glarus, and that town members still gather and vote by raising their hands today. In one of the interviews, a town resident in the video recounts being a teenager standing outside of the circle as she's watching men voting. So yeah, we wanted to include some of that archival footage in this presentation. So just 2 minutes.
Women have had a much more problematic relation than men to the world of money, wage labor. So they have depended much more than men on natural resources for their survival. I think the many accusations of witchcraft, are directed at dispossessing women. The accusation against women are very much connected with situations in which land is being privatized, communal ownership of land is being destroyed. So when the land is privatized, there is not only an economic loss, there is also a breakdown of communal relations, there is a breakdown of solidarity.
Okay, so the instruments in this video are alphorns. So they have a very unique relationship to the local context. So they're usually played on mountains where sound bounces off other mountains and echoes into the landscape as a way to communicate to other regions. So we were really interested in the use of sound as a way of marking place. And later in both of our works, sound becomes an even more important component as a way of conveying meaning in relationship to place itself. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump ahead to just one more project to talk to you about that before we go a little bit into Souvenir, and then can hopefully go upstairs and see the work in person together. So during Souvenir, I was also researching a new project on volcanoes. I remember calling one of my best friends from college and told her that my dream would be to make work about volcanoes. to have an art practice that would allow me to travel to other places, either through physical travel or imaginative travel, places that I am deeply drawn to, non-binary places where extreme geology rubs up against oceanic landscapes, places of geological friction that on an environmental, energetic, or historical level have political and psychic effects on the people who live there. More than a century before Mount Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii and its neighboring towns, Alaska's Mount Okmok erupted in 43 BCE and triggered global cooling that may have contributed to the famine and unrest that led to the fall of the Roman Republic. Fast forward to the year 2010. Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland erupts and halts air travel throughout Europe. I'm interested in how volcanoes are generative actors that lead to social and large-scale change, and how they also propose new forms of temporality, desire, and embodiment. This project speculates on volcanic landscapes as imaginative sites where how we think of land, time, and space can be reimagined. Breaching the space between the inner and outer Earth, volcanic eruptions are apt sites of theoretical experimentation. Like volcanic activity, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, and droughts, notes geologist Robert Frodman, are places where deep time erupts into our more familiar rhythms. On a metaphorical level, they highlight the precarity of human, animal, and plant life in proximity to impending destruction and regeneration, which is critical within contemporary discourses of art and environmental human-imposed harm. The first step to this project was a detour, a trip to the archive. I knew I wanted to begin this project with the 43 BCE eruption, but was having a hard time figuring out how to make this particular time and place visible in my lens-based practice. While researching Okmok, I came across a scientific paper that hydrologist Joseph McConnell wrote, and this was just a few years ago, and it's about the extreme climates following the 43 BCE Okmok eruption and its effect on the late Roman Republic. Unusual climate, crop failures, famine, disease led to social vulnerabilities and eventually led to major shifts in politics and infrastructure. Ice still holds debris and matter from this time period and thus preserves this history to this present day. It stores ash, chemicals from heightened CO2 levels affiliated with the burning of metals for coins, so early stages of capitalism, air pollution, and greenhouse gases associated with factories and war. I needed to visit the world's oldest archive, namely that of ice, at the National Science Foundation Ice Core facility outside of Denver, Colorado, where they store ice cores that are drilled from the Swiss Alps, Alaska, Greenland, and the North and South Poles. This project will open in 10 days at Amherst College in Massachusetts. Titled Belly of a Glacier, it consists of a 9-minute video with a musical score composed by Jules Gimbroni and the cello performed by an Amherst College student, Taz Kim. The film is shot in the Ancient Ice Archive, but also includes analog photographs taken by curator Geoff Hargreaves and video taken by ice scientist Elliot Moravec during their travels to Greenland, as well as a poetic text that I wrote to connect the glacial body to the human body and to the routines of care that sustain and condition these ice cores, preserving history in the hopes of predicting the future of climate change. So I will play this short video for you now. It's 9 minutes, and since the show hasn't opened yet, you're actually going to be the first people to have ever seen this piece. Yeah. I hope you enjoy it. Huh?
Yeah, exclusive.
Yeah. So I just lastly wanted to add in terms of that piece that the sound that was developed with Jules Gimbroni, they basically made a score that acoustically emphasized ice and metal, so the materials that are in the ice archive, as materiality, and also thought about the cello's relationship to the body, to time, to clocks, and to this effect of like call and response, or active listening, basically. And so I wanted to experiment with poetry in relation to scientific research to try and convey a feeling or atmosphere rather than just scientific data. And this is a strategy that you'll also hopefully experience upstairs with Souvenir.
Okay, so I'll close up the presentation by talking about Souvenir, what's upstairs now, which has been so great to work on and present here. So this is an aerial photograph that depicts the installation that we created, comprising of hundreds of plastic objects or more. Sure. So this plastic debris traveled across the Pacific Ocean and washed ashore on the coast of Washington, and it includes objects that were thrown out during the 2011 tsunami that originated off the coast of Japan. So this installation and also filming was a collaboration with John Anderson, a beachcomber, who lives in Forks, Washington, and who's been collecting plastic objects and just any objects that are washing ashore for several decades now, all of which he stores in his museum called John's Beachcombing Museum. So he also does the work of identifying these objects by finding clues to be able to locate their source, and he really had abundance of stories to share with us about the background of these objects that he was able to kind of locate. So we, for our project, we wanted to bring these objects back to their source, to where they arrived on the shores, and use a drone camera as a scanning device to highlight their surface, full of marine growth and residue due to their time in water for over a decade. So, and at the same time, in terms of the formal component, we wanted to reference how John himself collects, cleans, and orders these objects in his museum, caring for what others consider to be trash. So he's really giving them a kind of a prolonged afterlife. So this image documents an installation that we made for the video shoot, but when you go upstairs on the right channel, the silent channel, you'll see that it looks quite differently. So the way that we filmed it is much closer up, more close up, intimate perspective to really highlight the surface of these objects. It scans these objects for some time and then travels back into the water, marking in kind of reverse their migratory path. So in Souvenir, we were interested in these in-between coastal landscapes that are submerged during high tide and then present during low tide, a site that serves as a rich ecosystem for marine life. It's also a witness to ocean activity, a space that we're considering as a place that also holds memory. So we were, at the same time, a key part of this project was working with Ohan's family member that John mentioned, who survived a tsunami. And so for our multi-year collaboration with her, she was sending us photos and audio recorded memories of her experiences before and after the tsunami. So these kind of memory fragments that were creating an incomplete archive of her experience of loss and then recovery. In the video, we've also intercut our footage with footage that she shot with cell phone footage. When she went back to Japan to visit her home, scenes of the coast, her late husband's shrine, walking to her former apartment. So she was a key collaborator in the project, and we really wanted her to lead this aspect of the work. So for her to film the kind of visual world that would make up her story, to determine what parts of her experience she would share, how often she would share it, how she would share it. So at the same time, we worked with a marine biologist named Jim Carlton, who's the director of the Williams Marine Studies Institute in Connecticut, who was the first to publish on the historical significance of the 2011 tsunami in relation to plastic pollution, really kind of focusing on how plastic pollution impacts coastal species in the oceans. So this was really the first time that scientists were able to track rafting events, which is when marine species hitchhike and grow on man-made or human-made objects in the open water. So, traveling across the ocean over extended periods of time. So Jim Carlton theorized that these particular post-tsunami debris were able to travel for over a decade due to the abundance of plastic in our world. So while natural materials like wood decompose after long exposure to sun and water, plastic remains intact far beyond the decade-long journey from Japan to the west coast of the US. So this allows coastal marine species to raft on these objects and reach distant shores, drastically shifting local ecosystems with the introduction of new species. And in the video, you'll see Jim Carlton's lab and his vast collection of marine species that washed ashore that he's been studying. So while meeting with Jim and working with him in his lab, and he was so generous to really open up his space for us, we eventually learned that he developed his own way of photographing these marine species that were periodically shipped to his lab after they were found and shipped to him by beachcombers like John. So it was really kind of marking this web of relations around what's washing ashore on beaches. So his method, perhaps due to limited resources in the lab, was to press his cell phone camera against the microscope and then delicately tilt shift its angle until the image of a barnacle or oyster or bryozoa appears. And here you see an example. So we had showed up with our fancy cameras that we had borrowed from one of our teaching institutions, and then decided to quickly abandon it and follow his method instead. It was much more interesting and more authentic to how his kind of method of study and care for these marine lives. So every time we tried it, it was really difficult. We had to rehearse it over and over. Either the screen turned black or was filled with light specks. We were doing it too quickly, too abruptly, or we kind of thought the marine organism itself was resisting the camera. So we also worked with a person named Jose Campos, who is a caretaker of the oldest tide gauge, a wave monitoring machine in Cascais, Portugal, during a residency. And we also met with Josh Willis, who works at NASA, who explained how camera technologies in space monitor wave activity by photographing the motion of sun glitter on water, on the ocean surface. So these two different methods, more analog and kind of space, more advanced methods, really impacted how we filmed. So, measuring ocean waves with a buoy to drastically, moving upscale and capturing the motion of sunlight from space. So you'll see in the video us focusing sunlight on waves and then showing an image of a red pen marking the motion of wave activity, showing how something that's unruly in the ocean is kind of ordered into a legible visual form for scientific data. So this is an example of one of the images of sun glitter that's captured from space. And then the recordings of wave activity from Cascais, Portugal, from the tide gauge. So the data visualization of ocean waves from the tide gauge in Cascais, Portugal also served as an important source of sound for the film. So the tide gauge tracks wave activity on a daily basis. And to record the day's activity, oceanographers draw a line right in the middle of that wave in order to record the median number. So this is the number that they record in the official files. And they consider everything above the median line and below the median line as what they call noise. And this was very inspiring for us. This image also looks like the image of an EKG heart monitor too. So taking inspiration from this, we worked with an artist and amazing sound designer, Sindhu Tirumalai-Zami, to sonify the visuals, the visual data. So turning visual waves into sound waves for the visual score, which is what you'll hear throughout the video work. Okay, so in general, as I kind of talked through, we wanted to experiment with scientific image making and data monitoring strategies, but abstract them or kind of experiment with them a little bit more as a way to develop a more poetic and intimate vocabulary that could speak to both personal loss and also broader environmental harm. So instead of the statistics, we wanted to create a mood, a feeling of kind of loss and resilience, kind of balancing these two moods together. We also are bringing in, two stories, thinking about a kind of a cross-species narrative, bringing together the story of human species and marine species to see how this can kind of shift our perspective when we're thinking about disaster. So offering a different scale, different position, and different idea of resilience amidst trauma. So we'll end here. Also, if you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for being here in this weather also. And thank you to Hallwalls and to John for being so supportive. It's been really an honor to present here. So both of us are really so grateful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.